Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome into Ohio State Buckeyes Live. This is our 42nd edition of bringing you Ohio State football talk each and every week here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. So the deal is that we've got a lot of folks with busy schedules, including myself, but more so our guest contributors that come in each and every week and donate their time. So I'd like to remind everyone that what you need to do is subscribe to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Therefore, you turn on the bell, get the notifications, and know when we're coming live with Ohio State Talk each and every week and our other live streams for other various college football teams. We got Steve Hellwagon on the line for Bucknuts 247 Sports. Steve finishing up a quick lunch here to get set to talk Ohio State football. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing great. Again, we're at this time of the year where we're juggling football and basketball and everything else that's going on. It keeps you pretty busy. I'm going to leave to go to a Big Ten tournament on Thursday. The Buckeyes are playing Purdue Thursday night, 6:30. If they win, they get a rematch with Michigan State on Friday night at 6:30. So they've got their work cut out for them, and this could be one of the best Big Ten basketball tournaments we've seen, with so many teams ranked going into it. And yet right now the school is on hiatus right now, with it being spring break. No football practice going on this week, obviously. And they did announce yesterday that in regards to the coronavirus, they have canceled all face-to-face instruction for the rest of the month, and teachers, professors will be convening classes online, and not sure what the mechanisms and how that's all going to work out at Ohio State through the end of March, at least for right now, and no word yet about the spring game on April the 11th at Ohio Stadium. But yeah, these are definitely busy times.
So we invite your comments and questions. I will get those to Steve in the live chat. So we welcome in all college football fans from all various teams, and certainly get those each and every week. What has become a big topic in, I would say, the last 10 years in particular, at least it hitting social media, it hitting the news stream, Steve, has been the pay of assistant coaches and the importance that a head coaching hire, a head coaching extension of their contract has also filtered into what has been promised and guaranteed and then subsequently paid to the assistants, and how important that has been to a head coach wanting to establish and build a program and have that type of leverage to be able to retain or go out and get top-level assistants. And it has become a bit of an arms race in college football that's somewhat under the radar, in addition to the head coaching hires, in addition to the facilities and some of the palaces we see being built across the nation. We now hear about head coaching leverage in regards to their contract negotiations. And I'm not specifically talking about Ryan Day, because that's not necessarily the case here, but we have just in the last week received news of the assistant coaches there at Ohio State, a number of them receiving substantial raises of about $800,000 total, and that being key to maintaining a staff that's elite to maintain the program.
Yeah, no question about it. Of course, this began a week or two ago when Ohio State ripped up Ryan Day's contract and basically said that he'll have a job at Ohio State through 2026. And they laid out his pay. He's going to go from, he made about $4.5 million before bonuses in 2019 in his first full year as the head coach. He'll go up to around $5.5 million this year, and that'll be escalated even up higher into the $6 million range over the next couple of seasons. And then from there, they said that they will address it, presumably based on how well they're doing and everything else. But so that was kind of the start of this whole discussion, was putting Ryan Day on par with where he needed to be salary-wise in terms of the Big Ten. I think in turn, what they had was they noticed, obviously, you lose a guy like Jeff Hafley to become a head coach at Boston College. You're able to bring in or bring back Kerry Combs from the NFL ranks to being a coordinator, defensive coordinator at Ohio State. and they wanted to make sure that they were paying their assistants properly. And we get the email here the other day about how it's all going to go. You look at it. Tony Alford, the running backs coach, he got a raise of $18,000 to go up to $618,000. Matt Barnes got a $100,000 raise. The special teams coordinator, he'll now make $450,000. Kerry Combs, he's starting back in at Ohio State at $1.4 million, the most that they have ever paid an assistant coach, I believe. Corey Dennis, the quarterback's coach, his first year, so he's going to make $300,000. Brian Hartline, he gets a raise of almost $200,000, and he'll be up to $550,000 this year. Larry Johnson, $250,000 raise. He'll be making just over $1.1 million. Greg Madison, a $33,000 raise. He'll also be making a little over $1.1 million. Greg Studrawa, the offensive line, did an outstanding job. He got a $100,000 raise. He'll make $700,000. On down, Al Washington, $15,000 raise as the linebackers coach to $515,000. And Kevin Wilson, $250,000 raise. He will go from $950,000 to $1.2 million this coming year. So Ohio State becomes the first school to have 4 assistant coaches making $1 million or more. And they've got this money locked up in a lot of what you would consider to be the veteran guys, talking about Kevin Wilson on offense, and then the 3 guys on defense who are kind of the brain trust over there, Larry Johnson, Greg Madison, and Kerry Combs, all well over $1 million as well. So Ohio State is putting their money where their mouth is, and their outstanding football is. This team coming off a second consecutive 13-1 season, a third straight Big Ten championship, and first playoff berth for Ohio State in 3 years as well this past year. And it was Gene Smith, the athletic director, and Ryan Day, the head coach, that wanted to make sure that these guys were taken care of. And it is an arms race. If you've got good people and they're giving you great results on the field, you got to pay them at the top of the salary chart for college football. And, where some schools are probably paying their entire assistant coaching staff a total of $2 or $3 million. Ohio State is now up to $8 million committed to its assistant coaches. So Ohio State is on the forefront of at least this aspect of the football industry.
Mark Rogers, TV, the voice of college football. We bring you Ohio State Talk live each and every week with Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts, to typically have Tony Gerdeman on the line from the Ozone.net, and also Kevin Noon from Buckeye Grove. But it takes a lot to put together those 4 schedules. So we thank Steve for joining us here at 1 o'clock Eastern time this Tuesday afternoon. And of course, we let you know that if you subscribe, then you get the notifications and know when we're bringing Ohio State and other live streams your way. Kevin Wilson, he's been with the Buckeyes for a while. Here's a guy that built his name really as offensive coordinator at Oklahoma with their high-flying offenses. That parlayed him into an Indiana head coaching job. He was building something there and wasn't fired because of the on-the-field performance as much as some issues off the field. Then he comes to Ohio State, and he's obviously worked himself into a good position and may not necessarily be too motivated to take that next step to become a head coach again. But he's been with the Buckeyes now for how long, Steve?
I think this will be his 4th season, I think, coming up with Ohio State. It could be well, the years all kind of run together. 18, 19, maybe this is his 3rd year. I'm not sure. I don't have it off the top of my head. Either 17 or 18 was his first year. And, again, the offense has put up huge numbers. And I think that Ryan Day, very comfortable working with Kevin Wilson. And until Kevin Wilson gets a look for another head coaching position, and his name did come up a couple places this past off season, I don't think he's going to jump off to be a head coach now at a MAC school, given how much money he's now making at Ohio State. But certainly if the right opportunity came about, you would think maybe he would want to be a head coach again at some point. And I don't think it's unrealistic um, to see that day coming at some point for him. So, again, I think Ohio State is trying to do the best they can to reward him and keep him in place as long as it can. And I think that, again, very interesting the way that they've allocated their money in terms of these assistant coaches.
So it's currently spring break. I see that the Buckeyes went to the practice field for the first time in pads just a few days ago. Don't know if you had a chance and were given the opportunity to check out any of the padded practice.
No, that practice was closed to the media, and I believe they had 3 practices last week and then off this week, and then they'll be back at it, I believe, starting on Tuesday of next week. So, yeah, they're going to get right back into it, and it'll be a strong 4-week run up until the spring game on April the 11th. So we'll see how that all goes.
The loss of Master Teague, which we talked at length about last week. So, folks, if you check out any of the previous live streams, certainly do that, because much of the information and the perspective is still fresh from the past several weeks since the college football playoff game against Clemson. It spurred on a ton of comments, as you can imagine, and there seems to be a split between why aren't we recruiting better at running back? Let's go after this Zach Evans, who we discussed, of course, last week, the 5-star that's still non-committed and not signed for 2020. Why haven't we, again, with all the elite recruiting that we've done all over the place, why have we not stacked up the running backs a la Alabama and some other places? Clemson, I know that Georgia as well has a bevy of 4 and 5 stars. So there's a bit of panic out there, but then there's also the people that say, hey, when Urban Meyer was the head coach and even into last season with J.K. Dobbins, for whatever reason, this has typically been an offense that has been built upon the services of one running back, aside from those 2 seasons when J.K. and Mike Weber were sharing the duties, that Carlos Hyde was the man, Zeke Elliott was the man, J.K. Dobbins, of course, the man, and that's been good enough for this team to excel.
Yeah, no question. I think that part of the issue is it's hard to recruit a great running back when you've got a great running back, and you had J.K. Dobbins. They do have 3 other guys coming back on scholarship: Master Teague, Marcus Crowley, both of them now dealing with injury issues, and Steele Chambers, who played a little bit last season, took advantage of the 4-game rule and was able to redshirt last year. Right now, he's the only healthy scholarship running back that they have. They signed another guy, Mayan Williams from Cincinnati Winton Woods, outstanding running back down there from the high school ranks, and had been previously committed, I believe to Iowa State or Kansas State, one or the other. Off the top of my head, I don't recall. But at any rate, he switched his commitment to Ohio State. Well, I think it was Iowa State is where he was committed. And so he'll provide some depth when he arrives in the summer. I understand the frustration that people have. I don't think that Crowley or Chambers, are necessarily national top 15 or 20 players, but I don't think they're much outside the top 100 or around the top 200 or something like that. So, they're decent enough running backs. And Teague, as we saw last year, very capable player, had 800 yards, a lot of it in second half mop-up time as the change-up back to J.K. Dobbins. And he seemed to be very durable, very physical. So I think people are interested to see if he can get back fully healthy, how he could do as the lead running back. The initial report, and his injury occurred on a day when they were basically no contact, must have taken a bad step somewhere or something on the field turf, and suffered what is believed to be some type of an Achilles or calf injury. And according to Kevin Wilson, who was interviewed last Wednesday, almost a week ago now, he said it's probably looking like a 6-month return recovery, which I would take to mean that he'd be able to resume some normal football activity and kind of ease his way back into it, probably by the end of August, and perhaps even playing a game or two in September. But really, in all respects, you would think be back full go by October the 1st, which is for the meat of the Big Ten schedule. And I don't mean to be short-sighted in this, but it was remarked to me by one person that it's a 2-game schedule for Ohio State at Oregon early in the season, which if he does play in that game, you can't think he's going to be, 100% full go just yet. Maybe he'd get a few plays, but it would be hard to imagine him playing an entire game so quickly after the injury or so quickly after his return from the injury. And the other game is at Penn State later on. Those seem to be kind of the 2 games that linger over this Ohio State season. Granted, we've seen in the past they've dropped games to the likes of Purdue and Iowa, and even Penn State was unranked in 2016 when they lost to them, and they were able to overcome, some of those losses in 2016 to still get to the playoff, 27 and 18 to still win the Big Ten. So we're not ruling out the fact that somebody else could beat them. But long story short, getting back on this running back situation, is it's not good. I don't think anybody could sit here and tell you that this is what Ryan Day or Tony Alford or Kevin Wilson are really hoping for, to only have one healthy guy going through spring practice. And yet Coach Day did indicate that Crowley should be back full go for the start of preseason camp, which is good, back from his knee injury. And if we take what Kevin Wilson said at face value, that Teague ought to be back for the balance of the Big Ten schedule, perhaps as early as October. So that's good. Chambers is going to get every opportunity this spring to show what he can do. They've got a good-looking walk-on by the name of Xavier Johnson, who's also repped a little bit, and he'll get some opportunities as well. Is there frustration that they haven't recruited better? They were in on a number of top running backs in this past cycle and swung and missed on all of them, it seemed like, for the 2020 class, I guess, and had to go back in late in the process to flip Mayan Williams over to Ohio State. So they could do better. They're in on some of the top guys for 2021. Really desperately need to close on a couple of them to get the numbers back where they need to be and get quality as well. There have been some different guys, obviously, that are national top 50, national top 100 guys that Ohio State would love to have, but they're going to make do with what they've got, I guess, right now. And so I'm interested to see, how it all plays out.
Nobody certainly wants me to read through all the complimentary comments that come into the channel, but I do want to tell everyone that we appreciate the encouragement and so forth, whether you leave those on the live chat or I'm just sifting through the comments that we've received over the last few weeks from the taped segments. So once this live stream goes out, of course, it posts to the channel and it's there for you to watch. So if you miss any portion of the live stream, obviously keep in mind that it's going to post directly after we get done with the live portion of it, and you can go back and watch what you missed. So there's a ton of comments on here that thank us for the contributions and the expert analysis from Steve, Tony, and Kevin in particular. So I appreciate those, and certainly those don't go unnoticed. Nate Kingston on the line. Nate, you need to understand, I had a Michigan guy on here the other day that writes daily for Michigan, and he really couldn't answer this question. So we don't know a whole lot about the Michigan quarterback situation between Dylan McCaffrey and Joe Milton. Of course, both of those guys are highly, highly touted. Please check out the video that I posted a few days ago covering the Michigan quarterback situation. And all we can go on right now is basically what they've shown us on tape in high school, what they've shown us a little bit in very, very, very limited mop-up duty against opponents that really weren't worthy of the game in regards to evaluating quarterbacks. So, man, that is very much a work in progress throughout the spring and then into August. And I wouldn't expect a starting quarterback to be named until maybe the second or third week of August, Steve.
Yeah. Shea Patterson gave them some stability at the position, even if they didn't win big like people had thought or hoped that they would. He at least was there and answered the bell, and those other guys only got some mop up or change up opportunities here or there, maybe when a game wasn't going quite the way they wanted. But I think Harbaugh's got his hands full there trying to put a winner on the field. I was at the combine. I remarked um, that while Ohio State had 11 guys there, so did Michigan. And it made you wonder, like, how did Michigan have 11 guys who are upwardly mobile toward the NFL, and yet, they didn't win at a bigger level or better level than they did. They were a 9-win team, certainly, but, makes you wonder, why they didn't aspire to be much better than that. So, again, they have some talent, and I'm not putting it on coaching. I'm not putting it on talent. I don't know what to put it on. They're going up against Ohio State, yes, but there's other games that they play that they've struggled with as well at times. And it's kind of like John Cooper in the 90s. I mean, he had Ohio State flirting around with the top 10 quite a bit, but the 80s were very difficult. Late 80s, early 90s were very difficult, not even in the top 25 a lot of years. Well, then Cooper got you there to where, okay, now you're flirting around with the top 10. And what we realized was there was another gear above that to compete and win national championships. And they kind of hit that gear, at least in some regard, with Jim Tressel, and we're in that race quite a bit with Urban Meyer as well. So Michigan, I think, is probably in that second or third gear, looking to get into that gear where they're, flirting with the top 10 on a regular basis, and then the final gear where you're winning the Big Ten and contending for playoff spots in a national championship.
Steve, you don't think Cooper got there between 95 and 98?
Well, I think if the current system were involved, then he would have had 14 playoff teams, certainly in 96 and 98, and perhaps 93, maybe another year as well. But 95 possibly. They were number 4 in the country when they played Tennessee in the Citrus Bowl. So there's probably 3 of his teams would have made the top 4 and been at that level. I suppose so. It's just that we realize that to get to the very top of the mountain, there was one more gear left, and Tressel finally hit it in 2002 and kept the program at or near that level, played for 2 more championships after that, and had a team that was a top 3 or 4 team in 2010 as well. And you're talking about a coach that did that with one set of players in 2002, another set of players in 2006 and 2007, and another set of players in 2010. To me, that's kind of like the Bobby Knight effect from when he was in his prime, that he won 3 national championships with 3 distinctly different groups of players, 76, 81, and 87. And to me, that is when you know it's a program and a coach, and the school and the name on the front of the jersey as much as it is anything else. So I think that Meyer, of course, had Ohio State at or near that level as well throughout his entire tenure, it seemed like. And Day has started off on the right foot at Ohio State as well. I guess I'm just saying that, for anybody who thinks Michigan is close, and I don't say this to denigrate them, they're not close. They're 2 gears away still from being at the top of the sport. And I think that's what they're aspiring to get to.
You wouldn't think that Michigan would be that far away, but I agree. Certainly, if you look at the recruiting rankings, there's a, I don't want to call it a major difference, but a decided, substantial difference between recruiting the top 3 or 4 classes in the nation and recruiting one of the 12 to 14 best classes in the nation. It's just, and then when it's repeated year after year after year after year, plus when they step on the field and it's a 4 touchdown difference one year, that might be disclaimed as a fluke, as just Ohio State was on that day and Michigan brought in what was ranked the number 1 defense. And I'm talking about the game 2 years ago in Columbus, the number 1 ranked defense in the country, that had just, by comparison, you would think, okay, well, Michigan by comparison, and if you look at game scores and results against other teams, Michigan had the better team. They had the team that, well, let me put it this way. They had the team that had the better results in 2018 than the teams Ohio State faced. Michigan performed better against the same teams against the like opponents that Ohio State, but then they get on the field and Ohio State's 4 touchdowns better. And then they're 4 touchdowns better again the next year. So there's no question there's a difference. And I think the difference is amplified when the intensity of the game reaches that level. It's kind of odd that Ohio State will go out against the Indianas of the world, not necessarily this past year. They beat them 51-10, but on a regular basis year to year, and will be given a decent game by the Indianas of the world and some of the teams. And I'm not even talking about Iowa and Purdue. I'm talking about week to week against some of the marginal or mid-tier teams in the Big Ten. And then they go out and they just blast Michigan. I think it's just the intensity of the game. You see it in NFL playoff games sometimes where the intensity of the game causes the talent to be maximized, and then the superior talent really takes over when they're laser focused in that type of situation.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think that, you look at some of the different games that we've seen come down the pike here, some of the different teams and different seasons, and you get into that a do or die type game to decide a division or decide a championship, and some crazy, strange things can happen. And certainly that was the case. The Big Ten championship game was an example of that. Ohio State had kind of rubbed Wisconsin's nose in it earlier in the season, and Wisconsin came out from like the third play of the game against Ohio State. It kind of served notice that, hey, we're going to be here for the long haul. They were up 2 touchdowns at halftime, but Ohio State showed its class. And by class, I don't mean as in being good people. I mean by saying that kind of the racing form class, that they were that good of a runner that they were able to pull through in the end. So, yeah, very much the way that you think about just competitive nature and the cream rising to the top. All those type of things typically are what we see. We saw it, I think, LSU and Clemson. I think a lot of people thought LSU was the superior team going into that game, and it didn't always look pretty. But when the fourth quarter rolled around, it was obvious and evident they had the best player and the best team on the field, and they won the game. So, 9 times out of 10, that's what it is in college football, but it is kind of a crazy sport. I mean, how does South Carolina beat Georgia? Shouldn't have even been on the same field with them, type thing. But you do see some crazy things happen from time to time.
What really impressed me about the Buckeyes' comeback against Wisconsin is that typically, the Badgers were up, I believe, 21-7. So the Buckeyes won on a 27-0 run to close out that game, win at 34-21. Typically, when you see a game like that unfold in the second half in a complete turnaround, the other team is gifting the game to the other team to a certain extent. Fumbles, tipped passes, interceptions, miscues over and over. And certainly Wisconsin made mistakes. Every team makes mistakes during a football game. There's just too much speed out there, too much hard hitting not to make mistakes. But they didn't turn the ball over. Their quarterback didn't make bad decisions and give it away. That game was just dominated at the line of scrimmage in the second half, and Ohio State's just elite athletes just took over the game without really being gifted a single point in that game. So it was impressive for the Buckeyes to come back. And even though I had personally LSU as the number 1 team in the country going into that weekend, championship weekend, I felt that the committee made a poor move in moving Ohio State based on that performance versus what LSU did against Georgia that week. Had I had Ohio State at number 1, I would have kept them number 1 based on that performance, because I think Georgia and Wisconsin pretty much proved to be very similar opponents, and I think Georgia was given way too much credit for being as good as they were. A really talented team and still are, but the committee just gave the LSU win over Georgia just way too much weight, in my opinion, to juxtapose the positions.
Yeah, I think it was understandable, and you could have made a case either way. Some metrics favored Ohio State, and some metrics favored LSU. One of the reporters who covers Ohio State was at one of the mock selection committee things, and he says, they're looking at much more than just your poll ranking and your your computer ranking and different things. And they have the teams basically all these different categories, maybe up on a computerized board or some type of board. And we've seen these type things before when you're comparing apples and oranges and these kind of things. The teams that compare favorably have a lot of greens. Then the ones that are maybe a little down the line in the category have some yellows. And then the ones that are at the bottom of the list in that particular category of that subset of teams, which it could be computer ranking 1 through 10, where 10 would we think, oh, that's a great ranking. Well, in comparison to that subset of playoff teams you're considering, that's in red because they're the number 10 team. He said what had to have given them thought on Ohio State was across that board, across everything they're looking at, there had to be a lot of greens by Ohio State. And, we saw it with their offense ranking, their defense ranking, a margin of victory, all these other, things that you could put your finger on and say, even though they're in a lot of ways, apples to oranges comparisons, because you're not playing the same schedule by any means. You may have one, if you're lucky, a common opponent. And his thought was, when they looked across that board, computerized or placards or whatever it was, Ohio State's categories across the line were probably green, green, yellow, green, 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 whereas LSU's were probably green, yellow, yellow, green, yellow, 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 green, green, yellow. So just very minute differences as you look across that board was what maybe led some of their thinking, and some of those things must have flipped based on what happened with the Georgia game.
Yeah, they both played great schedules and dominated those schedules, so it was a razor thin. And I'm not I'm not knocking the decision to rank LSU number one. I had them ranked number one. It was just the flip flop at the end of the season after the championship game. A dog named Brutus has commented on the running backs position with Zach Evans, but also makes this comment here. And I understand the perspective that maybe the recruiting of elite wide receivers in Ohio State kind of morphing into this what is viewed possibly as a pass happy program under Ryan Day, but you got to consider they just churned out a 2,000-yard running back, so power running is still very much in play and important to the Ohio State offense. Would affect maybe the running back recruiting decisions of elite players choosing Ohio State, but I just can't think that that's the case.
No, I don't agree with that at all, because if you look at the statistics from last season, I looked at this last night while I was doing a chat. Ohio State ran the ball 62% of the time in 2019, which is even better than a 60-40 ratio. You talk about how successful teams sometimes, if they can average 200 yards rushing and 250 yards passing, you'd be very happy. Ohio State, of course, was way over 500 yards total for the year, so those numbers would have been a little bit skewed. But you look at a 2,000-yard rusher like J.K. Dobbins in this offense that Ohio State has. I don't know how that dissuades anybody from thinking anything about Ohio State in terms of being a good place for a running back. They just had their first ever 2,000-yard rusher. So I don't know. I'm of a mind that they're going to get this straightened out this year. They're going to get one or two blue chippers, maybe a top 25 guy and a top 100 guy in this class to fill that all-important position. They're stocked and set at wide receiver, although they're continuing to recruit more and more top receivers as well. So, these are the times to be at Ohio State. The recruiting class that they signed in 2020 for the offensive side of the ball was about as good as you could possibly get. So I'm not sure, offensive linemen, wide receivers, and running back, well, other than running back with just Mayan Williams, how much better they could have done.
Larry London. Hi, guys. I love the podcast. And again, we appreciate the many compliments, and that encourages us. And certainly that's great to see. So if I can't get to all of them in regards to, just keep in mind that YouTube used to give me a reading analytics on the number of comments that came in. And at some point, they changed the analytics and they took away that statistic, even though they are, quote unquote, improving their analytics and statistics that they give us. They eliminated the comments statistics, which at some point last year, and this wasn't even near the end of the year, was way over 50,000 comments to the channel. So I obviously can't keep up with them, but we appreciate all the kind comments. So thank you so much, Larry, and everyone else. Sasker LG brings up a comment here regarding the linebackers, and it brings to mind Baron Browning, the announcement that he would be moved to the outside this week. And we've had the linebacker conversation a number of times, so please check out the previous live streams with Steve, Kevin, and Tony in regards to talking about the linebackers stepping up and playing much better last season, but maybe not still to the elite level that we want. Sasker LG again, linebackers must step up. Need to see Mitchell, Gant, and Browning to take the next step. Speed and tackling ability plus coverage is needed. Go Bucks. But Browning was moved to the outside this week.
If you say so, I'll go with it. I don't think any final decisions have been made. I think they are mixing and matching all of these guys. They've got 3 seniors, 3 really good juniors, and I think they're all going to play, and they're going to come up with down and distance combinations that they like. I'll believe whatever is going on when I see it put on the field. I think Browning could be very instrumental, maybe playing the same role that Malik Harrison did as an outside linebacker last year, and a guy that could maybe bring some heat off the edge. I think he did end up with 3 or 4 sacks and a good number, double-digit number, I believe, of tackles for loss for the season. So I think that he's got the potential to really help this team this coming season. Whether he lines up in the middle, lines up outside, remains to be seen. Borland and Werner are going to play quite a bit. And then you have those 3 freshmen, Pope, Gant, and Taraja Mitchell as well, also in the running there. So I think you have to be excited about the idea that you got veterans and you got any number of directions that you can go. You should never be sitting there stalled in a particular game situation and not have the proper package to go up against it. And I would think that with Al Washington and Greg Madison, who helps a little bit with the linebackers, and then Kerry Combs coming in, that they'll have the right answer for whenever those occasions would come up.
We talk Ohio State football live with Steve Hellwagon each and every week. You can join Steve on Bucknuts, the 247 sports platform for Ohio State athletics. Also, Kevin Noon typically joins us from the Buckeye Grove, and also Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone. So please lock it in right here. And because of everyone's busy schedules, we can't give you a specific day and time every week. So what you need to do is subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell, you get the notifications, and I will let you know as soon as possible each and every week when we will go live with Ohio State football talk. In addition to this live stream, we bring you Florida State and Miami live streams each and every week. And also, I won't even go through the number of teams that we've brought designated live streams to you for 1 hour over the past several weeks, but they include Clemson and LSU and Alabama and a number of other teams. We're currently marching through positional previews for Ohio State and a number of other teams across the country, probably 20 to 25 teams. So please check out that content as spring practice has started for a number of teams, and other ones, especially in the SEC, start in about a week or 2. Steve, I know that in the past you have given your remedy to the college football playoff situation and what you would do. If you want to review that for everyone, because it's been quite some time since we had that discussion in regards to what you think might be an upgrade in regards to rewarding the right teams each and every year.
Yeah, I think the selection process, I'm not sure how much how you would really change that. I mean, there's been a lot of speculations they're eventually going to go to 8 teams. And when they do, I think that there are some benefits, obviously, that no deserving team would be left behind. But at the same time, I think that the push-pull of that, when you're talking about student-athlete welfare, paying the players or allowing them to capitalize on their name, image, and likeness, whatever it may be. I think this is another ask of the players. And I think without a rollback of some sort, doing away with conference championship games or going back to an 11-game regular season or whatever that might be, it kind of rings a little bit hollow to add another layer of playoffs. So I'm not sure what the remedy for that is going to be if and when that day comes. And I'm, again, there's always the undercurrent, people on Twitter saying, we've got to go to 8. We've got to go to 8. This is how we should go to 8. This is how we should go to 8. And yet the devil is kind of in the details. Like, do you have the top 4 teams host games the weekend after the conference championship games? If so, that means you're hosting games, potentially at Ohio State or Michigan if they're in the top 4. And I'm just throwing them in there for geographical. Notre Dame as well if they're in the top 4 in the second weekend of December. Now, I know they play outdoor NFL games really past all the way to New Year's weekend right now in terms of the regular season, and also get into the playoffs after that outdoors in the Kansas City situation. It was, brutally cold, I think, when they played their playoff game. So are there pluses and minuses to whatever the future of the playoff is and how they're going to, quote, solve it or fix it? I guess so. Again, the mechanism that you use to choose the teams and choose the players, I mean, am I really married and wedded to the fact that a conference champion should be, or that you have to be a conference champion to be in the playoff? I don't know about that. I mean, Notre Dame doesn't play in a conference. There's other independents out there. Not that we're really considering BYU or Army or anybody else who's an independent right now to be in the top 4 in a given season, because in the minds of most people, they don't play a good enough schedule. But I just look at it and I say, whatever way you have to do it, just give me the best 4 teams as of right now. And I don't really, Alabama made it as a non-champion and won the championship. Ohio State made it as a non-champion, got beat in the first round by Clemson a few years ago, so in the semifinal round. So I guess it kind of cuts both ways. But again, I think about things once they're into actually playing the games. This year you had the Pac-12 wasn't involved in the playoff, and yet and I think you'd ask Pac-12 people, what do you think about the officiating in your league? And they're going to say, like the officiating in every other league, the fans of every other league, it sucks. But, they're the best of what we have to work with, basically. And their Pac-12 would theoretically be at a level above American and Conference USA and some of these others, Mountain West. And I guess my number one fix right now would be to make sure that we never have a situation where there's a conference with a team in the playoff, not even in that game, just in the playoff period, that is calling that particular game. And when you have a 4-team playoff, it's certainly doable to have a major conference crew on that game that doesn't have a team from that conference in the playoff. I just think the politics of LSU already advancing and then having an SEC crew there to decide which team is going to play an SEC team in the championship was a little bit untenable. I don't know what the word is. Kind of brings about the idea of impropriety, I guess. I don't know. And if we had completely impartial conference involvement and officials from that conference, I think there'd be a lot less for people to complain about. In effect, the replay official from the SEC decided in some regards who won that game. And it shouldn't come down to that. In a playoff game, it should be the director of national officiating and 2 of his designees from conferences not involved. If it's a 3-man unit, each submitting a vote on yay, he was inbounds, nay, he wasn't inbounds, I don't have a problem with that. I think that's a perfectly honest and above board, beyond reproach way of deciding tough calls in these huge games. So that, to me, takes all hint of impropriety out of it if you can avoid having teams in the playoff involved. And then you come back again. We had in the playoff an Ohio State guy sent out against Clemson, and then Clemson had one of their guys sent out against LSU. They're doing away with the walk of shame. I mean, what more should the guy have to do? If he takes off his jersey and his shoulder pads, he can't go back in the game. There's nothing more the guy can do to impact the outcome of the game. He shouldn't have to leave the sideline. And I think that I presume that's where things are headed, that maybe the player ejected will, at least for targeting. Now, if somebody's ejected for fighting and their very presence in and around the playing field is a menace to spectators or the opponent, the officials, or whoever, then yeah, that person's got to go. But I don't know, targeting, kind of a gray area. I don't know. Is there an intent to injure somebody? I don't know. But I don't know what they're coming up with as a thing to get away from that walk of shame. But let's go even beyond that, just the impact on the game. I don't know. I think there are tough hits, there are heavy hits, there are hard hits, there are unfortunate hits, and I don't know. I mean, they've tried to legislate it all out to get rid of intent or get rid of unfortunate and just say it was a bad hit and you're gone. And I don't know. That's not real world. I mean, I don't know. We got to do everything we can to minimize the impact of injuries in this game. I fully recognize that, but in some regards, the penalty for these players who have been involved in some of these, you call them inadvertent acts, I guess. I don't know. Just doesn't seem to fit the crime. And so I don't know. I mean, had Wade hit Lawrence and Lawrence was out the rest of the game, I don't know. But hindsight's 2020. He left one play and came back after that, and I don't say he was fine, but he was able to finish the game. So kind of devolved off onto another topic that really encompasses all of college football. But I think there's a lot of frustration between coaches and players and fans as to what is legal, what's not legal, why is this illegal, but this is legal. A lot of inconsistency to the rule. I mean, in the very same game, a guy came in and hit J.K. Dobbins in a pile, helmet first, helmet to helmet. Nobody recognized it. Nobody saw it. Nobody buzzed down. And in some regards, they're going to say, oh, that's just football. That's just a part of a football pileup play or whatever. Why does that differentiate from what Wade did to Lawrence? I don't know. Looks worse to me. I don't know. But J.K. Dobbins, he's free reign. He can be hit because he's a running back. Is it a quarterback thing? I don't know. I don't think it is. I think it's applies anywhere, but you don't see it very often. I don't know. It just, to me, again, very difficult gray area because the safety has to come first to the players, in my opinion. And if there's a way to have something that keeps people from making these kind of hits and makes the game safer and they can still play football, then I'm all for it.
The physicality of the play of the Clemson player against Dobbins, and this is easy for me to say, I wasn't hit, probably wasn't near what it was Wade on Lawrence, but the intent was worse.
Yeah,
because you're in a pile. Dobbins isn't going anywhere. It's just an easy shot to take because he's right there. He can't go anywhere. He's not moving. He's barely struggling, and he's right there as a target. And you talk about targeting, that is targeting a player versus Wade just running at the quarterback like he typically does. And again, because of the size difference, and if you really watch that play, boy, that is a tough call against Sean Wade. And I would think that if you go through all the targeting calls throughout any given football season, especially in college, it's rare that you can specifically say, okay, that was intentional, that quarterback slid and then the player came after him or whatever the case might be. Most of it's just guys playing football. and doing the best they can. And again, we ask these defensive players in particular to just contort their bodies and do things that are physically impossible to do in a split-second reaction.
Yeah, I wish there was some kind of a meeting of the minds or a symposium or some way, and I'm sure that they've studied this as much as they can, but just to drill down on it even farther, I think it gives everybody, it makes everybody uh, kind of weak in the knees, I think, to even consider this, but gives everybody a headache that we've got to go through this issue one more time. But I don't know. I'm left with this sense that players are penalized almost too much for what is inadvertent or uh, just the word I'm trying. The word is escaping me. Just coincidental contact as much as anything. That it just in a sense just happened as part of a football play. It was not. I think I think if somebody's making a legitimate football play, they need to be given a little bit more of the shadow of the doubt, as opposed. Okay, if somebody's launching themselves at somebody in some kind of a suicidal mission or some type of last ditch effort to make some kind of heroic play or whatever, or truly to injure somebody who may have upset them on a previous play, then that person's got to go. I mean, that there's no question about that. But I don't think we're seeing that in a lot of these cases that guys are being sent off. I think the play you mentioned, if a guy is prone, there and you come in, they used to call it spearing, and that's not legal. It shouldn't be. And I think that I don't know, what can you do to keep it a safe game and yet have it so that players are unduly suspended or penalized for just doing what their teaching had led them to do. I'm not sure.
If anything, I've been amazed and impressed at seeing typically a handful of plays every game where I think, okay, that kid's been playing, whether it's at the NFL level or at the collegiate level. So this guy in particular has been playing for the last 10 or 12 or 15 years of his life to some degree and been playing a certain way. And he's been able to adjust. He wouldn't have made that hit in the same manner 3 years ago than he's
That's
making it
right.
now. And now he's been able to reteach himself. And it's one thing to reteach yourself and go over it in practice and think, okay, I now need to lower the shoulder. I need to move, turn my head and make sure I'm hitting them with the shoulder. It's another thing to do it when you've got a receiver running a 4-3 across the middle and you're doing this in a split second's notice and you're able to contort your body and do it a certain way where you're still making a football player, not letting that kid run for a 40-yard touchdown and still making the proper hit on him based on a rules change that was enacted 2 or 3 years ago. I'm actually impressed by these defensive players making the adjustment most of the time.
Yeah, I think it has gotten by and large safer because of the rules that have been legislated, and I guess I'm just now looking for a happy medium to where again, somebody who seems to be almost the victim of circumstance gets put under this scrutiny and under this light, and had zero intent to injure anybody, and it was just a happenstance type situation. So again, the original question was, what would I do to change the playoff? Those are probably the big things: changing the playoff and changing college football. I think those are some of the things that I think about. Um, you know, I'm honestly beyond that. I mean, I don't want to say we have a perfect sport, but we have a pretty good sport on the whole. And you wish that there was a little more parity in this sport than what exists. I make the comment, Indiana, and we've brought him up on this show talking about Kevin Wilson and different things. When the season begins, Indiana is not in the competition for the college football playoff. They're going to play 12 games. but they haven't spent the money on facilities, they haven't spent the money on coaches, and they haven't recruited at high enough level to put themselves in that position to contend for a playoff. We will have, you think about, I think this past year was Wake Forest opened up like 5-0 or 6-0, and people were like, oh, this is a top 20 team or whatever. And eventually they kind of came back down to earth, and got blown out. I think Clemson beat them a 1,000,000 or whatever. It's just kind of right now, the issue with our sport is this whole notion of haves and have nots. And, in basketball last year, we saw Texas Tech, a team that's not anybody's going to confuse them with Kansas. They're playing for the national championship. It can happen in basketball maybe a little bit more and a little bit easier than it can happen in football. And I think if, and I'm speaking as someone who covers a blue blood program and probably benefits from the fact that Ohio State's in the hunt every year, the same would be said for Clemson and Alabama. LSU did finally jump up into this level, but it took an extraordinary set of circumstances for them to get a quarterback who they didn't recruit out of high school that kind of fell into their lap. Now they surrounded that player with some tremendous talent. I mean, as we saw at the combine, they had 13 or 14 guys. So, long story short, maybe a little bit more parity in this sport wouldn't be too bad. But again, I think that most fans have a hard time imagining how do we take the greatest sport in the world and make it even better. I'm open to suggestion on that.
We're going into year 7 of the college football playoff, and basically Oklahoma has locked down the Big 12, Ohio State the Big 10, Alabama to a certain extent, the SEC. Obviously, Georgia jumped up a couple years ago, but then was beaten by Alabama in the championship game. And of course, as Steve mentions, LSU this past year, and Clemson, the ACC. So it's become boring from that standpoint. It's a great sport. It's the best product in sports, in my opinion, on the field. And then you add the tradition, the pageantry, the prestige, the tradition, all those things. I just think it's amazing. The product on the field is so fun to watch. And again, all the periphery, rabid fan bases. But in terms of predicting what's going to happen, you pretty much have 5 or 6 schools to choose from. And very few outside of that have much of a shot. Steve, we appreciate you stopping by as always. Steve is gracious enough to post these to Bucknuts. So check out Ohio State football coverage and athletics across the board, of course, with the men's and women's basketball teams in action this time of year on Bucknuts, the 247 sports platform for Ohio State athletics. So join Steve right there. And, of course, lock it in here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Steve, have a great week in Indianapolis.
Oh, we will. Thanks, Mark. Take care.